to move to a new slide, the question's gone. But okay, so without further ado, let's kick off. So the value of air cargo. Brian, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Oh, thanks so much. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And I have been asked to start off with a little bit of a chat about the value of air cargo to the worldwide economy. You know, so often when we talk about aviation, we focus squarely on passenger travel and its contributions to the economy because they're easy to see: travel, business connections, connectivity. And they're critical, but you know what we don't often see, or what we fail to appreciate, is how air cargo quietly drives and powers a big part of the global economy. So I'm going to raise three things very briefly, or as brief as I can be. One, talk about the enormous scale of commercial contributions of air cargo, the role that we have in supporting e-commerce, and then specialized commerce. So rather than walking you through the slides that I'm going to put up, I've pulled some images and data from IATA's air cargo web portal, which has an amazing wealth of information if you want to take a look at it. And hopefully they'll educate you and I'll entertain you, but if it goes the other way around, I'm totally okay with that. Okay, well, hey, so guess what? Here's the first here's the first polling question. So I should have put this up and then gone through the little intro, but please just take a second and scan it. And the question is, how significant do you believe air cargo is to the global economy? I already gave you the answer, so don't get this wrong. Please? So while you guys are responding to some of that, one of the things I want to talk about, I'll pop up a slide in a second that talks about what a day in air cargo looks like. But I want to give you some massive numbers right off the bat. 35% of the global value of commerce travels in air cargo, but it accounts for 1% of the volume, right? And that means 99% of the volume only accounts for 65% of the economic value. And, you know, I'm kind of talking about something that is hard to picture, but it's just the immensity of those numbers when you think about it. So, okay, good. Everybody got the right answer. Air cargo is extremely important. Golly, if I'd done that right, you wouldn't have been as entertained. Anyway, here's the 24 hours, and I'll let you guys look at that. I'm not actually going to talk about it, but if you just look at all the kind of different things and the volumes that are kind of moving on a day-to-day basis, you know, again, this is in IATA's cargo web portal, so it's really interesting stuff. So, you know, I mentioned that we've got about 35% of the world economic value in goods moves through air cargo. That's roughly $8 billion a year, right? That's 3.5 times the GDP of Canada. Right? You know, you just wrapping your mind around that is a little tough to do. And you know, what we're doing is behind the scenes. We're doing the just-in-time delivery for supply chains that you don't always see. It's aircraft components, it's medical supplies, semiconductors, even luxury fashion goods, right? These are all industries that depend on the speed, the safety, the security of the air cargo market that you don't necessarily see. There's a whole ecosystem, freighters, integrated carriers, our customs clearance brokers, and you know, they make this function, and we're dealing in goods where the margins are too tight or the requirements are too specific to put something on a ship. And the other thing to keep in mind that kind of ties to this is that, you know, the global trade architecture supported by air cargo, it's not just an economic story, right? It's a society story too. We've all left our iPhone on top of the car and pulled into moving traffic, right? You want that phone the next day. But it is also the natural disasters, the political unrest, and the kind of things that we can be there to support instantly and integrate those needs as things stabilize back into our systems, right? So, you know, the economic story is nice, and it tells a social story as well. E-commerce. Back to my iPhone that I left on top of the car. here is just a little data from IATA, but this is something that we all experience, right? IATA says that air commerce is growing about 17% a year for the coming future. You'll get different numbers depending on what sources you're looking at, but it's generally anywhere between 15 and 20%. And this isn't just a retail trend, right? It's an industrial trend as well. Nobody wants the cost of the overhead of storage and warehousing. You can be a small business and try to get your stuff to market all across the globe, or you could be one of those shippers, and we've all got the apps on our phones. We don't need to endorse anybody because we know who we're talking about, who need that platform to reduce their overhead and do that buy it now, get it tomorrow promise. Achieved. And it really is a democratizing factor, right? When you have small exporters in, Ireland or South Africa that are able to compete on the same kind of international platform level, as a Alibaba or an Amazon or anybody else, because these air cargo networks and their safe, secure delivery is in place. What I would also say there is it's a changing market. Peter is with DHL. I'm with FedEx. Jorg is with Lufthansa, or representing Lufthansa Cargo today with that hat on. We're all facing the same kind of challenges in agility, right? We need to have everything data driven. We need to make sure that our aircraft and crew numbers all match up what's being driven by the business. So we have to adjust to the needs of a changing society, a changing economy, but on the same time, we're helping drive it, right? These transforming supply chains are changing in real time, and they're affecting a global marketplace. So again, the slides are for your education. I'm entertainment. So I wanted to talk about the thing that really entertains me, which is special cargo. My favorite special cargo is pandas. I'll have to give you that little plug there, right? But in reality, these are those goods that have high value, high urgency, or specific sensitivity. And that kind of stuff is shown on the slides. The latent economist in me loves this slide because you wouldn't necessarily know where these goods are moving to and from. And it's everything from medical equipment, supplies, vaccine components, fresh cut flowers, to chips and prototypes for technology. The specialized handling needed increases the value and often the economic stimulation that's tied to these kind of goods as they move in and out of the markets. You see the flower flows from Africa and South America northward. You can see all of the pharmaceutical movement out of Europe. It really is just a really fascinating kind of study in how air cargo is driving your lives, and you may not necessarily see it or know it, which, good. Why does this matter to you? I got the right slide in the right place, right? So why does all this matter? It gets your stuff to you. The businesses get their stuff, and all that stuff creates jobs, right? So when I talked about the economic ecosystem, it really isn't just about what you needed today or tomorrow. It's what those businesses needed to supply that, and who's making your paychecks to make sure that this kind of economy keeps working. And so, these are just some examples of things. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but this is how it affects your day-to-day life, and the life of everybody in your society, right? Which takes us to the next slide and question. So while we ask that question, kick it over to Peter real quick.
Thank you, Brian. So, do you believe that air cargo should be given equal consideration as passenger flights when it comes to airport slot coordination? Only right answers, please. Because after that wonderful presentation from Brian, we will now transfer that into our world, into the airport slots. In certain cases only. It gets less.
You know what, Peter? I think there might be one more slide after this.
Let's see.
So I don't know who got the wrong answers there.
No. At least the majority got the right answer.
Yeah.
One non-cargo.
Yeah.
No. And this is just it. This was to go with that slide. So, depending on how you voted on the last bit there, just take a look at air cargo in context. This isn't a competition between passenger and cargo, but when you kind of look at the differences in the way that they contribute to the economy and what drives them, this is something to keep in mind. So, thank you. Sorry. Got out of order there.
Okay, so now, how are we unfairly treated? Another question, what's the biggest challenge air cargo faces in slot coordination? Is it the WASG, which doesn't really represent us in cargo? Is it the coordinators, the regulators who give us a hard time? Is it airport infrastructure limitations? Or are you not sure?
Do Jorg and I get to vote? We should have got ours up here. Jorg and I should have brought our phones so we could vote.
So, a lot of you think it's a priority for passenger airlines. Honestly, here, there is no right answer. Because you will see on the next slide what we are facing. And in the end, it's a mix of all the three. So, I'll give you some examples where we as air cargo operators are differently treated than passenger airlines. So, let's start with the first one. Quite often, we request a slot, seasonal, series, all the things you need to get potential historic status, and you just get it as a temporary slot on ad hoc basis only. For example, Bogota, they never give a historic slot to cargo operators because they just made a local rule. Same, Dubai. Another one where you can't get historic slots as cargo carriers. Then, in China, this also is a common problem. However, there is a potential that you could get a historic right, but not right away. So you need to operate quite some seasons before they might consider giving you some historic slots. And then, of course, what also plays into here is traffic distribution rules. In the London area, for example, so Heathrow and Gatwick, no chance to get a historic slot as a cargo operator. Is that fair? We don't think so. Another thing where we are treated totally differently than any passenger carrier is in China. There, a cargo airline only can operate between midnight and 6 because there is that so-called cargo operation window. It's on every Chinese airport. And why they are doing it? To protect passenger flights. Personally, I don't think it's because of the airport infrastructure, because usually Chinese airports, they have enough space, capacity at the airport itself. It's more the ATC, the airspace, which is quite limited in China. Unfortunately, we have to suffer quite a lot due to that we can't operate at the times when we need it. Because you've seen from Brian what we all do, and not everything what we transport must or can go in the night. Some of that stuff, due to the time zone differences, we want to depart at 1800 in the evening, right after pickup of in the business day. The next one, parking limitations. One of our most common issue we really have when it comes to cargo slots. Lisbon, for example, the slot coordinator, he can't, or you get the slot, but you can't get the full confirmation because the coordinator first has to ask the airport for their parking blessing. And that's something which, of course, should not be the case because an airport is not really an independent party. They have their own interests. But here they interfere into the coordination process, which they shouldn't do. Now, for example, we have a lot of around the world flying. It's not that we constantly operate from base to somewhere and back. No, we have to stop for a longer time for maintenance to cater for the business needs, also at outstations for 12 hours. And parking is crucial for us in some cases. And then, of course, we don't want to have parking excluded from slot coordination. Rather, an independent slot coordinator to assess our requests. Other things, what we commonly see is that we have different local rules for cargo parking than for passenger parking. Very prone for that one is Hong Kong, for example. A passenger carrier can park 12 hours maximum, a cargo carrier only 10. Voting procedures in coordination committees. Why are we bringing up that one? Simply, we fly usually to many different airports, but not with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 frequencies a day. Often it's only 1 or 2. And of course, if you fly to many places, but not often, the number of votes we have is not that great. Which means we are often, we don't have any say often when it comes to voting in a coordination committee. I have more. These are a bit shorter. Riyadh, for example, there you have a 45 minutes cargo separation window, which means only every 45 minutes a cargo carrier can get a slot. We don't understand until today why this is the case and what that restriction should bring as a benefit there. In Nantes, there's a curfew, but if you come with a cargo aircraft, the curfew is even half an hour longer. How did they do that? They just basically did it with the aircraft type, which only cargo carriers can have. Stansted, they had a planning permission. They wanted to extend their terminal. How did you get it? Did they get it through? Quite simple. Let's declare a maximum number of cargo operations at the airport. We don't need the terminal. Then London Luton, also a funny one. They just ban ad hoc slots. So, for example, when you have a truck going through a Eurotunnel, there is something with the Eurotunnel. The only option to bring that cargo into the UK would be flying it. You can't fly it into Luton, unfortunately, because you can't get ad hoc slots at Luton during certain phases of the year. Again, Luton. Oh, they don't like cargo, it looks. Every airport has to repair runways and do the maintenance. Totally understandable. But planning a runway closure only affecting cargo flights and protecting 100% of the passenger flights might be not the most fair thing to do. When it comes to coordinators who sometimes implement regulatory rules, some recent developments, what we saw were really these 60 minutes, 55 minutes, or 120 minutes limit when it comes to its historic determination. For us as a cargo carrier, we maybe more often have to adjust slots because traffic flows change, seasonalities, which might mean that our retimes sometimes to a slot might be bigger to cater for certain needs from the economy. And these restrictions are not really helping us. And finally, Some airports make it quite simple. They completely ban cargo flights or force them to move out. And some examples here is Mexico City. Mumbai is a threat. And also Dubai. There, only one cargo carrier is left. So, why do you think air cargo is often deprioritized in airport slot coordination? Is it the lack of awareness of the economic value? Is it some stakeholders interested to influence the allocations? Is it existing historical precedents? Or are you not sure?
Oh, there you go. That's interesting.
That's interesting.
I'm surprised that nobody said lack of awareness.
That's an interesting answer.
Oh, there's somebody.
There's someone.
There we go.
Our guess was actually that the lack of awareness would be the most common answer here, which is good to hear, good to see, honestly. That's not that much the case, but rather the stakeholders' influence in the allocations. And with that, I'll hand over to Jörg.
So now it will be the part actually, what do we do about it? and I have another 30-minute presentation prepared, but I guess I will shorten that. So I think our least problem and our base to start off is actually the WASG clearly states that all slot allocation should be done fairly, non-discriminatory and transparent. And in all the paragraphs in the WASG, it clearly is cargo carriers on an equal footing with passenger carriers. So the discrimination that we actually heard in length about from Peter, that comes from other places. And before I go into it, let's see in the audience here, actually how many colleagues from cargo carriers, maybe you can shortly raise your hand. I do my own Slido now. Are you from cargo carriers? Only a few?
There's a few more.
And
They're hiding in the...
And from passenger carriers, only passenger carriers. Thank you. And from coordinators, actually, a few. Welcome. And from regulators, one. Welcome as well. Yeah. So actually, our audience are more the people who know about the issues or experience the issues, but I think what we have seen from Peter's presentation is actually we have a host of different influences from infrastructure, from regulation, not from the global slot guidelines, but from the local regulations actually. And so we are asking actually for the support of all you colleagues in the audience here to help in our cause. And we have an IATA campaign about equal treatment for cargo carriers going on. So talk with your local regulators, local authorities also. And yeah, I would also have the appeal for the slot coordinators in attendance and also for the regulators in attendance. Please look into your local regulations and check if you, I'm certain you agree about the value of cargo traffic for the world economy, but also for your economy. So please check your local regulations, your local rules, and certainly also airport operators in terms of parking stands and all those rules, where you can find, or you got some ideas where cargo carriers might be not fairly treated. And yeah, please start the process on getting those discriminatory rules out of play and align them with the WASG and the principles of fairness, non-discriminatory treatment, and transparency. And I'm not sure if we have another Slido actually. So I have to lean a little bit. Should airport slot coordinators be required to publish a post-initial coordination review showing how slots were allocated by airline type, especially passenger versus cargo? Long question, but actually I think not too difficult to answer. So I guess, again, we have an overwhelming majority actually upholding our principles. That's good already from the WASG about transparency as well. Yeah, so certainly that would not be, the result of those outcomes would not clearly give a black or white answer to if someone is fairly or unfairly treated, but certainly it would enhance the transparency and give a base to work together to solve some of the issues mentioned. Thank you. And we have another question. Would you support the reservation of airport slots for cargo operations? Now we get into the controversial stuff. Actually, I mean, I'm a split personality here. Actually, many split personalities, but most of them actually are passenger carriers. So would be interesting. Actually, it's quite easy to answer for me, but let's see what you're thinking.
Very interesting. I'll tell you my opinion as a cargo carrier in a minute, because I think the results are interesting. So, as a cargo carrier, it would be easy to say and think, yes, let's reserve a certain percentage of slots at an airport just for cargo. No one else can have them. Easy life, we solve all these problems which I mentioned. Not at all. That's not the solution. If we would do that, quite simple. The next one will come. The next stakeholder, like general aviation, business aviation, or whoever might have an interest in getting some, a little portion of the slot pool. That's not an efficient allocation of capacity. Not at all. So definitely, as a cargo carrier, I would say this is not the perfect solution, or not a solution to solve the unfair treatment of cargo carriers.
And you also run the risk of it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You set something aside saying, oh, good, for a policy reason, we've protected them. But then it either means you hit that capacity or you're reserving that from competition with other things. So, the WASG probably has it right here.
So yeah, it might surprise you. Actually, we on stage here are 100% on the no side on that question. And certainly because, there might be a bucket for cargo only, but it's pretty sure that the timing you are needing actually would not be in that bucket maybe or something. So ring fencing for special purposes is always inefficiency, and I didn't mention the most important objective actually of slot coordination is to make best use of airport capacity. And ring fencing slots for whatever reason, as good as it might hear, is not a good solution, and it leads to inefficiencies. So, but the results are very interesting, as that shows us from the slot policy working group actually that we also have to continue and more discuss with you, talk with you as cargo carriers, that the simple solutions that come to mind are not already the best, or not always the best solutions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Fantastic overview. We've talked about the value, we've talked about the problems we're facing, what we might want to be doing about this. Now we've got another slide up here, which is inviting your questions, please. You can vote on other people's questions if you like to see which ones get to the top. But while you're considering that, I just want to touch on, if we go back in. That's good. Sorry, Tom, if you could just, thanks. While we're coming back to that, it will just show as a, there we go. Once we have the questions coming through, this screen will change and you'll start to see people's questions. But while we're doing that, I just wanted to touch on some of the items which we've discussed here. We were quite surprised, or it looks like we're quite surprised, that there isn't really a lack of awareness about what cargo offers us. And yet, I mean, we're talking Brian mentioned that we're talking about trillions of dollars being moved every day. And yet, we also said that on this feedback, there is an influence from some stakeholders. This does kind of form a picture that actually people understand cargo, but there's still a problem here. Would you, gentlemen, be able to sort of give us a little bit more about where you think this influence is coming from, why coordinators are not able to be independent? Where is the source of this problem? I'll be looking at these questions.
I'll comment on one facet of that. I think that awareness is important, but you talk about influence of stakeholders, right? And the conversation is a lot harder when you're talking about worldwide, trillions of dollars of economic movement or even local stimulation because to markets, because people worry about what's in their own backyard. And the airports are certainly very, very concerned, reasonably so, about the throughput, about the money that gets spent at the airport terminal and the facilities. But so I think that leads to some level of a differentiation in influence when you're talking to regulators to try to fix some of these problems. And it really becomes a challenge to showcase how do you balance the needs and wants of those airports versus the entire local, regional, and national economic health that that cargo provides. So that's part of that answer.
And what I would also say, some stakeholders like airports, they forget sometimes about one goal they should have: to be an infrastructure provider for a country, for an economy. It's part of what an airport should be. An airport is not just there to maximize profit. Otherwise, the whole aviation system for airports wouldn't work anymore.
Elevation of airports in national strategies, I think, is one way to address some of this, right? Point out that an airport is a gem, get it built into the national economic strategy.
Okay, now, Jörg, I'm going to pick on you if that's okay. Probably because you can't see these questions so easily, but would you like to take the top question here, where we're saying, what role should regulators or airports play in safeguarding cargo operators' access to critical infrastructure, particularly during global disruptions?
That's quite a difficult question. Actually, we just had a global disruption and with COVID-19, and hopefully we'll not have a global disruption again. But anyway, actually in those kinds of global disruptions, it's obvious to everyone the importance of cargo. And we have seen to give medical supplies, equipment to the right places. And actually, in that kind of crisis, actually only a few passenger airlines are operating. So actually, I'm thinking that this is a problem that solves itself, by the way. So I would rather go to the next question, I guess.
Would you like to take that one, or would you like to pass it to one of your colleagues? You get to choose who.
So what is it? Some countries give preference to their national cargo airlines with slots and hours restricted to foreign carriers. As I said, certainly we have the global guidelines, but we all know from our experiences wherever we're working in this industry that sometimes local governments don't fully understand the importance of I treat the non-national carriers the same way they should be treating my airline in their destination. So it's a give and take. And sometimes it takes longer to learn about it or not. So clearly we need to know about these issues. I guess most of those are well known already, and we have to talk. And we have to make clear, if you don't want to be unfairly treated somewhere else, you should treat those airlines coming from those places the same way. So I guess that's part of the solution.
Thanks, Jörg. Now, who would you like to choose to answer the next question?
Which one do I like more? That's
Do airports typically get more charges from passenger operators?
Brian, what do you think about it?
Oh, thanks. Wow, Jörg really likes me today. No, okay, so the question is, where do we get more charges from the main? Sorry, guys. Who's the main?
Yeah, do airports typically get more charges from passenger operators rather than
Well,
freighter?
yeah, okay. So I think you're looking at a multifold question there again, because I don't know if we're talking about percentages. I don't know if we're talking about numbers of charges or types of charges, right? Do I think that it is significantly easier for airports to find ways to charge cargo carriers more? Absolutely, yes. We tend to run older aircraft, and there are noise and emissions issues tied to that. We tend to operate at night because that is what the economy, not us, it's what the economy dictates that we supply. Golly, that means we have another opportunity for charges. Do we often suffer the issue of not being able to enter as a scheduled carrier in a market? Yes, there are countries that make you operate for years as a charter carrier before you can even apply for scheduled service. FedEx has been a scheduled carrier for more than 50 years, right? We go to an airport and we're told, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get monthly ad hoc charter licenses for 6 months, and then we'll consider giving you a 6-month license. And after you've done that for another 2 years, then we'll think about letting you apply for scheduled service. And you know what those scheduled services get? Lower rates, right? That's one of the reasons to avoid having to go into a market as a charter carrier. So, I think, largely speaking, airports have more passenger tenants. I think they probably draw more revenue, perhaps, off of those charges. But I do think that cargo carriers can easily be a target for differentiated charges, and you see this, happening particularly in Europe. The charges modulation and a few other things going on. So, I think the answer is yes.
And actually, from my passenger experience, boxes don't go shopping in airport terminals. And that's a very important income stream for airports as well, that get concessions and percentages of the sales in the shopping malls. And that's a disadvantage we have to think about as cargo carriers.
And if your boxes are shopping, you have bigger problems.
Okay, so we'll go through these last 3 questions before moving on, and we summarize the session. Now, is the slot board looking at this issue? Let me take a backward step here and just highlight that the gentlemen here are all 3 representatives of the IATA's slot policy working group. Now, we've been focusing on cargo, the importance of cargo, and the need for quality and a level playing field, probably for about the last 12 months now. Hence, you're starting to see more presentations such as this. There'll be more communication. Now, the slot board is not specifically looking at this issue at this minute. There are agreed items of interest from the different stakeholder groups to start discussing. But it's an interesting, we think we should take back to this SPWG to see whether we should be recommending, as an airline group, to look into this. So we'll take that one away. Now, we've only got about 2 minutes left. So, Peter, would you mind just quickly touching on this top question here? If we agree that we need changes to the WASG regulation to provide equal cargo treatment, who is the main stakeholder who opposes? It's the regulators, airports, or airlines?
If you look into the WASG, there is no unfair treatment in. It's about the application. One of the main stakeholders, of course, is in some countries, regulators. For example, in China, where it is written down in the regulation about that cargo operation window at night. If you just apply the WASG, there is, in theory, a completely fair treatment. Apart from that, it depends a little bit. Local rules can be driven by airports, can be driven by regulators, can be driven by noise groups. For example, in Dubai, for example, it's more or less the airport who pushed a local rule through a coordination committee to kick cargo carriers out. In the London area in the UK, it's traffic distribution rules. There, it's the regulator who made it law. So it's a case-by-case thing. It depends on the country. But purely looking on the WASG, if everyone would apply it as it is written, as it is meant, we wouldn't have that discussion here.
Okay, we're going to need to draw a line here. Very quickly on this last question, I just want to say that there's often an impression that cargo carriers are operating old, noisy aircraft. This came up on one of the last sessions, actually, that we did on this. And it should be highlighted that actually there's plenty of new aircraft out there being operated by cargo operators too. Just in the same way the passenger airlines also operate older, perhaps more noisy aircraft. So it's a misconception which can be a little bit misleading sometimes. But we won't go into more detail on this at this minute. That's one for the future. We just want to summarize, say thank you very much for joining us here. In particular, thank you to the gentlemen on the stage here for sharing their knowledge and their experience. If there's one thing we'd like to ask of the audience, please share the message. Please support, encourage equitable slot allocation for all carrier types, be it cargo, leisure, passenger. We don't want a divided world. At the end of the day, we're here meeting market needs, so let's not influence those market needs. Thank you very much.